economics and ask the question, what's next? I'm Jennifer Zabasaja, and this is Next Africa.
New episodes every month, only on Bloomberg.
At a time when policy in Washington is driving Wall Street, we draw a distinction between the rhetoric and the action, bringing you market-moving guests and original reporting. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Know how the market day started.
Find out how it finishes.
Public markets to private markets.
From the micro to the macro.
Covering retail, entertainment, the business of sports.
The supply chains, trade policy, how it all is impacting the U.S. equity market as we drive to the closing bell at 4 p.m.
A holistic approach to covering financial markets.
If it matters to your life, we're covering it. I'm Katie Greifeld.
And I'm Romaine Bostic, and this is The Close.
Live every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Get your fixed income fix. Watch Bloomberg Real Yield around the world right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Lizzie Burden in London, and these are the stories that set your agenda.
Taking you from the U.S. market's close to the overnight session in Asia, we'll walk you through what you need to know to kickstart Europe's trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market-moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in to Daybreak Europe, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
Welcome back to the opening trade. It's Friday, everybody. A few minutes to go until we get the start of cash equities trading. So this is the picture on U.S. stocks from yesterday. You can see that European markets closed up, which is that yellow line, around session lows for U.S. stocks. So we do have a little bit of upside to price in from that U.S. session. Through the latter part of the session, we started to get more of that messaging from the Trump administration, from Benjamin Netanyahu. Both of those over the past 24 hours have been talking in slightly more reassuring terms, at least about the extent to which they intend or not to target energy infrastructure, and that has relieved some of the pressure when it comes to energy prices. We see oil prices slightly in retreat, gas prices slightly in retreat, and as a result of that we saw a little bit more risk appetite for stocks. So we look, Tom, to see that at the start of trade. The futures picture does look positive then. We could be up by 0.9% on the DAX, so that's encouraging, but we of course lost more than 2% on most of these markets in yesterday's session.
In terms of individual names and sectors that we are focused on today, there was one sector that is in positive territory yesterday. That was the energy space. We'll see how that changes and adapts on the back of softer Brent and WTI prices, at least for now. Gas prices also falling a couple of percent in the session, so not significant, but we'll see if that reflects across the energy stock space that again did outperform yesterday. Unilever in focus on an update in terms of its potential sale of its food assets, so we keep an eye on Unilever. This is a story been reporting around. And postal stocks on an upgrade in terms of the view from FedEx and whether or not there's a read across there. That stock jumped almost double digits in the US session. We'll see if the likes of DHL move on the back of that story, Anna.
Yeah, it's interesting. The middle of this week, we started to ask questions about whether markets could decouple from the headline risk around energy assets in the Middle East. Well, the answer later in the week was certainly no. And yesterday, we got that message firmly. Energy stocks were the only sector in Europe in positive territory. Everything else was down, and we were down by more than 2% on these major bourses across Europe. So today looks like just a bounce from some of that negativity. How positive will we be today? What extent will we see that bounce coming through is really the only question. The FTSE 100 is up by 0.4%, waiting to see if we get some better gains from some of the markets that maybe have lost a bit more ground. The DAX, the CAC, for example, the IBEX over in Spain as well. So those markets a little slow to open this morning, but we are seeing a bit of positivity being reflected on that FTSE 100. And yes, we've got the CAC open and up by 0.8%. The IBEX up by more than 1%. So in some of these markets where we've seen more heavy selling, we are seeing some of those gains coming in. The energy sector was the only positive sector yesterday, as I mentioned, Tom. Basic resources was the only was the worst performing sector. And so it was interesting to see those two polarize. And today we see a lot of parts when it comes to energy prices and underlying commodities. So I wonder what the sector picture looks like today.
Top of the list is basic resources right now, up 1.6%, given the upside we've seen in prices around iron ore, around copper, around gold in today's session, of course. So reversing, at least to some extent, the losses that we saw across basic resources yesterday. So basic resources at the top of the list across your sectors. In fact, now it's travel and leisure. 1.5% for travel and leisure is the gain. Construction is up 1.5%, and basic resources also around 1.5%. So they're all tussling for the top spot right now. On the downside, just one sector in negative territory. Not surprising to see that it's energy down 0.8%, given that we're seeing a little bit of pressure again on Brent and WTI today. So energy is currently down 0.8% after being the best performing sector, the only sector in positive territory yesterday. Again, basic resources, travel and construction in positive territory with gains of around 1.5%, Anna.
It's like someone's put a mirror up against yesterday's session and worked out the opposite, and that's what we seem to have today. So as you point out, yeah, basic resources doing well, energy stocks doing less so. We still don't have the DAX open, but we do see broad positivity across these stocks, but not making up for yesterday. Stock 600 up by 1%. Individual movers then, and Tom, you were talking about those postal stocks. Deutsche Post is one of those. It's up by 2.5%. We had numbers out of FedEx, of course. Prosus is up by 1.8%. That's often moving around on what's happening with its 10-cent stake, and there's been a lot of news on as much as it should have done because we've been too busy talking about the Persian Gulf. But we will certainly return to those tech themes in our next conversation. We are joined now by Karim Shadid, who is head of EMEA Investment Strategy at BlackRock, with us this morning. Karim, nice to have you with us, joining us from Paris, I think, today. I wonder, as we bring, well, I was going to say bring to a close, but there's still a whole day of trading left, isn't there? But we're in the last day of trading of what has been an incredibly volatile week. Do client conversations that you're having, Karim, as you travel around Europe, do they look like, are they all about defensive moves? Are they all about trying to find havens, trying to find safety? Is that where investors are, where their thoughts are going at this time?
Actually, yes, thank you. Really happy to join you from Paris today at the end of a roadshow, speaking to a lot of our clients across the continent. And actually, to your point, there's a spread in the conversations. On the one hand, when we look at the polls that we've been running on of our clients, of about 1,200 to 300 clients per week in these polls, in this time series of data, we are seeing that the bull minus bear, so kind of the net bullishness, is at the weakest in terms of sentiment since February 2020. As the market attention shifts around circular financing last month and late last year, to back to the fundamentals. Why bringing attention back to the fundamentals and the really strong earnings picture and the breadth of the earnings picture really brings back focus on this opportunity.
It's interesting, Karim, you mentioned that, because you can draw a line between what's happening in the Middle East and threats to AI. And I'm thinking here about the cost of energy. Energy is a big component of what AI businesses are trying to do. They need a lot of energy to do it. And also, Tom was making this point yesterday, that there could be threats to the amount of investment dollars available to invest in some of these AI projects if some wealthy nations in the Middle East aren't making quite as much as they used to. Are investors saying it's too early to join those dots, or they just don't expect the link to be that great? What's your thinking?
There's definitely a link on the energy front, and I think one of the key themes investors and clients are talking to us about is this idea of energy resilience and the energy continuum, right? As the build-out of AI happens, and the big power demand theme that you're alluding to is super important here, this idea that you need all parts of energy. You know, I come back to a theme that I've spoken about with you before in previous interviews around sustainable energy, and why the performance had come back to that space in May last year, and has and very much linked to this power demand theme. But then also traditional energy is very much in focus. You were talking about some of the near-term volatility in the sector. Yesterday, a very strong day. Today, seeming a bit weaker. But if we zoom out, you know, there is an opportunity energy continuum. The refiners, for example, are really, really important in this space. Margins are looking better across the whole energy continuum here.
Karim, Europe is often flagged as a place where you can find some of the players that feed into the energy piece when it comes to supplying and supporting data center build-out. What are you seeing in terms of US demand for European equities at this point? You're not seeing capitulation across these markets, but are the US starting to capitulate on Europe?
So you were talking about mirror images earlier, and one other mirror image you'd see is, you know, in Jan and Feb, Europe and EM stocks have been significantly outperforming the US. And then you look at March, and it's exact mirror. A lot of the momentum plays in Jan and Feb have reversed in March. And that's in equities, that's across asset classes. You'll see that partly why gold has also underperformed in March. Anything that did super well earlier in the year is unwinding a bit in March. And here it's important to distinguish the fundamentals from what's just a momentum unwind. And to your point, bringing it back to Europe, we are still seeing demand and flows. They have not dropped off completely. Domestic demand for European equities remains very, very strong. It's definitely still there in March, despite some of that performance unwind. Understandable why the performance picture looked the way it does. Europe is potentially could see some inflation shock if the shock in the Middle East sustains, depending where the oil price rests. Of course, the forecasts here are very much a moving target because all it depends on is the duration of the supply disruption and where the oil price ultimately rests. If the oil price drops back down, you could see a bounce back pretty quickly. But all this to say, we are still seeing domestic demand for European equities. International demand waned a bit, but it hasn't turned into selling.
Where do you think the earnings vulnerability is going to be most acute for European stocks in the face of higher rates and higher energy prices?
So here we still look at the selectivity message in Europe. We really think that sector selectivity and single stock selectivity, the active approach in European equities makes a ton of sense. A value approach in Europe probably still pays off if the cycle continues. This is assuming that the cycle is not disrupted by the supply disruption. You might see some revision down in growth, some revision up in inflation. We're looking at about 0.5% magnitude here if the oil price sustains. But then you can still see these types of value approaches make sense in European equities. The sectors that we've been focusing on, whether it's in the industrial space, whether it's in the financial space, remain the favored areas to access Europe, whereas the consumer, to your point about vulnerability, consumer-facing sectors could be a bit more vulnerable.
Karim, it's interesting that you say in your conversations with investors that some of the themes that go back to before the Iran war started are cutting through around AI, for example. Investors were also worried. Story yesterday that suggested that private credit investors or credit investors broadly are more concerned about trying to find cockroaches, areas of vulnerability, and business models to be nervous about than they are about the spillover effects from the Iran war. Maybe it's just a question of time, but what are credit investors thinking about, do you think?
I would say that we have seen some caution, but not panic. And there's a big distinction here. There is this sort of cautious hat that investors are wearing, whether in equities or in credit, looking for potential risks on the dashboard. But we are not seeing any sign of panic. We're not seeing any, flight to safety by any stretch of the imagination. Here that still stands is this idea of carry. This idea of, yes, you might see some spread widening here and there during weekend credit more broadly in the past couple of weeks. And we have seen some clients, we talk to bring down the risk, from high yield exposures a bit, bring it down to neutral or maybe just below neutral. But we are generally seeing this mindset of continuing to carry credit with the idea that all-in yields can compensate you for mild spread widening.
I wonder what the linkages are between credit and gold. You still like gold, Karim, as a hedge, as a geopolitical hedge, really?
Yeah, so that's a call that obviously hasn't looked great in March. I stand by that, but when we look at gold, we really need to zoom out and think of the bigger picture. Some of the structural drivers of gold, such as purchases from central banks in emerging markets, which can be a bit price sensitive. So we see signs of that come back in March because it is a bit price sensitive. So on dips, when we zoom out, gold is still looking quite lowly correlated versus stocks and bonds on a 10-year basis, sub 0.1. Clients we speak with are very much still asking for gold and about gold. In the polls that we run, gold has constantly come through in the top 3 net add exposures when asking about asset allocation shifts.
Okay, on the case for gold. Kerim Chedid, head of EMEA investment strategy at BlackRock. Always appreciate your insights across these markets, Kerim. Thank you. Let's get you a touch and a picture on the core 6 right now. 11, 12 minutes into the Friday session, and you're seeing broadly across the core 6 gains, apart from Novo, which is essentially flat. The strongest upside currently coming through for ASML in the tech space, of course, up 1.6%. Similar gains for Schneider Electric, talking of those European companies that play into the data center story and the energy story. In the defense space, Ryan Mattel popping 1.2%, so a decent gain there for a stock, of course, that's rallied in the last 2 years substantially. LVMH, which has seen some pressure given the luxury story in the Middle East, 1.4% is the gain, actually, for LVMH. So that is the picture across the core 6. Let's get some details on some of the other individual stocks on the move this Friday, bringing Charlie Wells. Charlie.
Good morning, Tom. So let's kick off with airlines because they are in the green this morning, flipping from being in the red yesterday. So up well into the 2s for EasyJet, TUI, and IAG. Now, this could be some dip buying. This could be traders saying basically that they buy the narrative that the White House wants to try to take some pressure off of the oil situation right now. So again, seeing positivity here, even despite some pessimistic comments coming from a lot of executives yesterday about having to push prices on to consumers. Let's flip and let's talk about Infineon. This is the German chip company. What we're seeing here is also a lot of positivity, well over 5%. And this has been another theme of the week, right? That AI narrative coming back, giving a boost to a lot of these chip companies, particularly here in Europe. So Infineon up right now, well over 5%. Different story when you take a look at Smiths. Let's bring up Smiths, that British engineering company, onto the screen, down over 4%. So they had an earnings report out today. Clearly, that disappointed the market. They were talking about returning over 1.5 billion pounds or 1.5 billion pounds to shareholders, but the market not liking this. This could be uncertainty right now. This could be a little bit of that rate issue, a little bit of the hawkishness spilling in to some of these engineering companies. So we're going to want to watch that for the rest of the day. I am watching with great interest this next one. It is JD Wetherspoon's, down over 8%, almost 9% here, because I love a pub. I think we all do, particularly on a Friday, and particularly after a week like this. They also had an earnings report out that was disappointing, clearly talking about that consumer that's under pressure. Now, JD Wetherspoon's, of course, they talk about offering pints at reasonable or sensible, if I believe. I've spent enough time in those pubs, sensible prices. But when you have those thin margins, when you get this uncertainty, when you get a lot of this pressure on the consumer, you get pressure on the likes of JD Wetherspoon's as well.
We all love a pub. I'm just checking out to see whether the Jon Snow in Soho is a Wetherspoons. I thought it was. Anyway, we all love a pub on a Friday, particularly, as you say, Charlie, after a week like the week that we've just had. Charlie Wells with the stocks on the move this Friday. Thank you. Coming in and coming up, we're going to check back in on energy prices. You're seeing European gas a little weaker, just by around 1% right now on Dutch gas futures. Brent is trading down 1.4% at 107 after, of course, breaking through about $113 per barrel yesterday. WTI at $93 a barrel, so that spread continues, of course, between the two markers on oil. Currently down 2% on WTI. We'll see how sustained this is as Trump and Netanyahu try to reassure around energy infrastructure. We'll get more details and more conversation, of course, around that. We'll get an update live from Dubai. We'll have plenty more on that evolving story. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
At 9:30 a.m., the market tells you what it's really thinking.
We beat the drum to the opening bell.
With deep analysis of the forces driving the price action.
Focusing investors on what really matters.
Where the money flows, which markets are changing.
Conversations with players shaping the narrative.
Innovative growth companies gravitate to NASDAQ.
It's not just like, let's buy the Mag 7 or AI.
That's a really compelling story.
This is where your trading day begins.
And this is Open Interest.
Only on Bloomberg.
bringing you up-to-the-minute global news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Hazlida Amin in Davos, Switzerland, and this is Bloomberg.
Astonishing day for US technology.
Shaping the region's technology ecosystem.
Asia's biggest tech news and innovation.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm David Gura.
I'm Lisa Mateo. And I'm Christina Raffini. We're tracking breaking news. Let's start overseas. The sector is really propelling this deal forward.
Yeah, the hope is this will open up new markets and provide some additional...
We got a big week coming up in politics.
Earnings season is underway. We're going to get some key reports.
Everything you need to know before the markets open on Monday.
Introducing Bloomberg This Weekend, bringing a little Bloomberg into your weekend routine.
Guys, buckle up.
Trading day is about to start.
And you're already looking for that edge.
The opening trade brings you everything you need to know as markets open across Europe.
I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Tom McKenzie.
This is your opening trade.
Only on Bloomberg.
Welcome to the world of decentralized finance.
Why is it that NFTs have not recovered in the same way that, say, Bitcoin has?
Bloomberg is covering all things crypto.
It's a pretty spectacular story.
The people.
This is the future. This is the 21st century economy.
The transactions.
It snapped up nearly $1 billion of Bitcoin.
And the technology.
We need to build a digital Fort Knox.
That gives people financial freedom, and that's a wonderful thing.
That's extraordinary.
We ride the wave that is Bitcoin.
Bloomberg Crypto, only on Bloomberg. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, only on Bloomberg.
Welcome back to the opening trade. We are 18 minutes into today's session. Broadly, you can see, of course, gains across the benchmarks. The index over in Germany, the DAX is actually outperforming, up 1.4% across your sectors. Construction at the top of the list. Energy seeing a bit of pressure as a sector, currently down 0.4%, Anna.
European gas prices are lower and oil has dropped from its highest close since July 2022 as leaders from the US and Israel sought to reassure energy investors rattled by damage to major Persian Gulf energy facilities. Bloomberg's Jumana Basechi is in Dubai and joins us now. Jumana, bring us up to date with the actual damage then that we've seen to Qatar's LNG plant. I know there have been strikes on facilities in Kuwait as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Anna. So a big strike took place at the Ras Laffan facility yesterday, as we spoke about. And over the course of the evening, Qatar Energy put out a statement defining how much damage they had been sustained. And what they did tell the market is that 2 out of their 14 LNG trains had been damaged. That represents about 17% of Qatar's LNG exports. And that the damage itself will take 3 to 5 years to repair. It's equivalent to about $20 billion in foregone annual revenue, and will likely to force them into a long-term force majeure with many of those customers. And you will remember that at the beginning of this war, they also announced a force majeure with some of their customers on some of those shorter-term contracts amounting to around $17 billion. But this just takes it to a whole new level because it suggests that this is going to take not months, but years to fully get back to the capacity that was targeted in yesterday's strikes, and not just affecting LNG, it affects condensates, LPG, helium, all of those other gases that are related as well. I should also say that in the UAE, this is getting less attention, but still very significant. 2 main gas facilities also targeted yesterday. Now, there were successful interceptions, but they've also halted production. That amounts to about 75% of the gas processing that's coming out of the UAE. So we continue to see these supply constrictions coming through from this part of the world. And then, to your point, Anna, overnight, more attacks on refineries. Second day in a row that a refinery in Kuwait has been targeted. They've announced that they've halted production too. And so if you list all of the refineries that have been targeted since the beginning of the war till now, you're looking at about 2.5 million worth of refining capacity. Now, most of these refineries have not sustained extensive damage like the LNG facility has in Qatar, but they have halted production, which just adds another dimension to the supply disruptions that we're seeing.
Yeah, and to some, of course, casting our eye back one or 2 days, Jumana, Israel kind of crossed that Rubicon in terms of its attack on the Iranian gas facilities. We've been hearing from the Israeli Prime Minister, Netanyahu, there's been an attempt at de-escalation from both Trump and Netanyahu, particularly when it comes to energy infrastructure. What have we been hearing from the Israeli leader?
Yeah, I would say specifically de-escalating one specific part of the war, which was the Israeli attacks on that South gas part field in Iran, deemed to have crossed the line. President Trump very clearly was trying to distance himself from it, even though there were various reports suggesting that the U.S. would have been privy to the information beforehand. And then yesterday, we did see official commentary from the Israeli Prime Minister. He gave a press conference and said that Israel had acted alone. They were not acting in conjunction with the U.S. And at President Trump's request, they have said that they will no longer be targeting Iranian energy infrastructure. But that is not to say that the intensity of the strikes have diminished, because the ongoing operations, the joint military operations, have continued overnight. Reports of very heavy airstrikes over central Tehran. And as I was just saying to you, Iran continues to lash back at Gulf states with these volley of attacks coming through on multiple countries and not just exclusively directed at Israel.
Jumana, thank you. Jumana Pasechi in Dubai. Meanwhile, the commodity market's view on the financial impact of the Iran war is more bearishly than that of the equity and rates markets. That's according to Simon White, macro strategist for Bloomberg Markets Live and author of the Macroscope column. He joins us now. Simon, we're seeing a modest reprieve in Brent and European gas today. Is that telling the full story? Is a protracted energy crunch being accurately reflected across other asset classes?
The short answer is I don't think so. I think that when you get energy shocks, it's not only how long they last for in real time, it's how long they last for over a longer period. So the longer they last for, the longer they take to remedy. So when, for instance, refineries are powered down, or when gas plants, liquefaction plants are powered down, they take a long time to power back up again. So you have these kind of what economists call hysteresis effects. That means that you just can't suddenly switch things back on again. So I think that the financial asset markets are not pricing in that longer-term impact that commodity traders already see. If you look at, for instance, break-even rates, inflation break-even rates, or CPI fixing swap rates, certainly in the US, they're still pricing a temporary inflation shock. So I think there's a mismatch there between the markets.
OK, so if you think there's a mismatch in the different asset classes then, Simon, and you think maybe commodity markets are taking this more seriously, other assets a bit more complacent, do you think it was sensible then that short-end yields globally, but in particular in the UK, jumped as much as they did yesterday, or did you think that was overdone?
I mean, that was quite a dramatic move. If you're ever going to see a dramatic move, it'll be in the short sterling and the UK rates. Look, I think there was a realization there that the Bank of England, obviously the Bank of England and the ECB are more inflation-targeting banks, and they are not expected to have an incoming, chair like Kevin Warsh in the US, who's perhaps going to be more beholden to the government. So there's a lot more kind of freedom to move there. I think the dramatic move, like the size of the move, the extremeness of the move in the UK was kind of probably a stop out as much as anything else. But I think underlying it, there's a real understanding that the Bank of England acknowledged the fact that second round effects, inflation effects, are likely to come through. And then, of course, central banks, they say they won't act against what they see as a supply shock, but they will act against what they see as inflation becoming embedded. So that was kind of the penny dropping. So although the move was quite perhaps kind of over the top on a short-term basis, the underlying kind of sentiment behind it, I think was correct. So, that this is something that's going to be an issue for central banks. It's complicated in the US, of course, just as I say, because the incoming Fed governor is maybe not necessarily expected going to be an inflation fighter.
Thank you so much, Simon. Thanks for bringing us your perspective. Simon White, macro strategist for Bloomberg Markets Live and author of the Macroscope column. And it's interesting, he, like many others, saying, maybe that was an overdone move on short-end gilts yesterday. But we're not seeing it unwind hugely today. We're seeing those gilt yields. They were up 30 basis points yesterday, 2-year, down 3 now. So there's a bit of move back, but not much.
And possibly there is less to unwind given what we've seen with the deficit as well. So the latest deficit figures coming in higher than many had expected. So that's another constraint for the UK.
Let's talk about trade. Robert Stager will be joining us shortly, chief economist at the World Trade Organization. He tells us about the state of global trade with everything that's happening in the Middle East in mind, of course. That interview next. This is Bloomberg.
Have you ever thought about, or would you make a movie for a streaming service? Would you make a Netflix movie?
Man, that's a great question. I mean,
I'm waiting for one where I ask and you go, that was a shitty question.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you good at your job, bro. Like, this is actually the first time anybody's ever asked me that. You know, I'm not here to say what I would and wouldn't do in the future. You know, but the theatrical experience is one that means a great deal to me. It means a great deal to us. Mm-hmm. I feel a certain responsibility. Like if Fruitville had happened a calendar year later, it probably would have come out on streaming. You know, I've been fortunate enough that everything that I've written and directed has been a theatrical release. So I feel a duty to try to protect that. You know, but that's where I'm at today.
Africa, a region rife with potential for growth and opportunities, but not without its challenges. Bloomberg highlights the biggest stories, interviewing key players, and reporting on the issues impacting the region. Join us as we get to the heart of African business, politics, and economics, and ask the question, what's next? I'm Jennifer Zabasaja, and this is Next Africa.
New episodes every month, only on Bloomberg.
Know how the market day started.
Find out how it finishes.
Public markets to private markets.
From the micro to the macro.
Covering retail, entertainment, the business of sports.
The supply chains, trade policy, how it all is impacting the U.S. equity market as we drive to the closing bell at 4 p.m.
A holistic approach to covering financial markets.
If it matters to your life, we're covering it. I'm Katie Greifeld.
And I'm Romaine Bostic, and this is The Close.
Live every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
This is the opening trade Friday morning, 30 minutes into Friday's cash equity session here in Europe. And European equity markets look like they're reversing some of the trends of yesterday. We were down by more than 2% on some of the major markets in yesterday's session. Ongoing concerns about elevated, higher energy prices, energy supply as well. But today we've put those to one side. We're slightly reassured, at least from an energy perspective, by some of the commentary coming out of the US and Israeli administration. Energy prices are a little bit weaker, and so we see stocks go higher. We're up by 1% on some of these markets, the Xetra DAX in particular getting some decent gains. So, Tom, we changed course, reverse path on some of the moves of yesterday, but we're still very much focused on everything energy.
And it's quite broad-based in terms of the gains that we're seeing yesterday. But again, to your point, in the context of a drop of more than 2% by the close for European stocks yesterday. But again, quite broad-based in terms of the modest lift. We'll see how sustained that is in the days ahead for European stocks. Right now, you have about 500 individual names across the stock 600 in positive territory, and as you can see, about 88, close to 90, just in negative territory. Volumes are relatively light versus the 20-day average, or on par with the 20-day average. Not a huge amount to talk about there. When it comes to the leaders and laggards, let's break it down for you then. On the leaders side, Interestingly, tech is getting a lift today. That's one of the best performing sectors. Infineon upgraded by JP Morgan. That's had a ripple effect across the tech space. So that is up 5.4%. ASML also getting a lift as well, of course. The Dutch maker of those lithography machines, up 1.2% so far for ASML. A big weighting across the Stoxx 600. And Santander, the banking space, is also gaining as well. A bit of a sell-off, bit of a pronounced sell-off, of course, banks yesterday. So maybe making up for some of those losses. Santander currently up 2.3%. On the downside, energy names. Again, a bit of a mirror image, a reversal in terms of what we saw yesterday in the session, where energy was the only sector in positive territory. Today, it is on the downside, of course, on weaker oil prices, at least for now. Brent, BP then, under a little bit of pressure, down 2.4%, but again, in the context of the gains that have come through for these energy majors. Shell is down 1.4%, and Smiths Group falling 5.3%. That is a different story, unrelated, of course, to what's happening in the energy space. But this is where your attention should still be, is on what's happening around energy and how that's rippling across, of course, these various asset classes, Anna.
Tom, so that's the markets. Let's get up to date on some of the other stories that we are focused on this morning. The Financial Times is reporting that JP Morgan has started a monitoring program to guard against overwork by its junior investment bankers. The program will track bankers' weekly digital footprint, including video calls, desktop keystrokes, and scheduled meetings. Bloomberg has learned that Blackstone's flagship private credit fund is planning to sell bonds backed by its over $82 billion of assets. BCred, the world's largest business development company, is looking to finalize the collateralized loan obligation deal, or CLO, early next week. The Blackstone fund earlier this month took the unusual step of asking some of its senior lenders to pitch in $150 million to help fund elevated redemption requests rather than cap investor withdrawals like some of its private credit peers. And the European Central Bank will need to consider hiking interest rates as soon as next month, that's April, if price pressures build further due to the Iran war. This is according to the Governing Council member Joachim Nagel. The ECB's new projections show consumer prices will advance in the euro area this year, and in an extreme scenario, inflation could peak in the first quarter of 2027. So April, perhaps, from an ECB perspective.
오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도, 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조, 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도, 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조, 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도, 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도, 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조, 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도, 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조, 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 오늘 시장은
oil at 110 around current levels, but we have a 30-day disruption and a 60-day disruption case, in which case the price of oil might go to 130 or 150 in that very adverse scenario. So that's the way to think about it at the moment, and then as we learn more about how the energy situation evolves, we have to sort of update our probabilities on these different scenarios.
So what does this mean for the European economy? On inflation and growth?
Right. It's, I think, easy on headline inflation. We're clearly going to get a big boost here to headline in coming months. It's also relatively straightforward for growth. We're going to get hit, possibly quite a sizable one. And to give you a sense, we have downgraded our GDP forecast by about 0.5% so far, which is quite significant. We've upgraded our headline inflation forecast to rise towards 3%. That's the relatively easy part. I think the really hard part for central banks is to judge to what extent you could get persistent effects into inflation, second-round effects, which, of course, yesterday in the ECB's press conference was a key topic. And here, I think the lesson really has been, if the shocks are moderate to energy prices, you can probably look through them. But if they become big and persistent, you get second-round effects, and you have to respond.
But how do you know if they're big and persistent, given it's a supply shock?
It's very hard. So, I mean, passage of time, obviously, is one element. Do energy prices kind of stay this high for a long time, or do they come down? We can see that. What is happening to the forward curve for energy, I would still say that is saying that we should see some relief in coming weeks. Also look, of course, at any damage to the energy infrastructure, because the more we see, the harder it will be for flows to resume. Those are, I think, the things we have to focus on immediately. The next stage is then to look at early signs of second-round effects, inflation expectations, firms' pricing behavior, wage demands, and so on. And over the next 6 weeks, by April, we might have news on this, as Joachim Nagel, of course, said this morning.
But I mean, if we have a hike from the ECB, I mean, first of all, let's just talk about market expectations, because they're expecting the ECB to...
네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 것이 합리적입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보니 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 대규모 순환 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매가 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 문장입니다. 시장은 예측입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은 상승장 초입이 아니라 자금 이동 구간으로 보는 것이 합리적입니다. 마지막 한 문장입니다. 시장은 예측이 아니라 대응입니다. 지금은 방향보다 흐름을 읽어야 할 구간입니다. 오늘 시장은 상승했지만 외국인 대규모 매도 대형주 약세 테마 중심 상승 순환매 구조 이 네 가지가 동시에 나타났습니다. 따라서 지금은
Know how the market day started.
Find out how it finishes.
Public markets to private markets.
From the micro to the macro.
Covering retail, entertainment, the business of sports.
The supply chains, trade policy, how it all is impacting the U.S. equity market as we drive to the closing bell at 4 p.m.
A holistic approach to covering financial markets.
If it matters to your life, we're covering it. I'm Katie Greifeld.
And I'm Romaine Bostic, and this is The Close.
Live every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories.
And we're here, where the action starts in Sydney.
And in Tokyo, get ahead as the global trading day begins.
The Asia Trade, weekdays only on Bloomberg.
I'm David Weston. Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. We go on the road for a look at what lies behind the headlines of today and what will likely be the headlines tomorrow.
We need more transparency. Oil and gas is still important.
They said every citizen should be investing in the market.
Accelerate progress in all fields of science.
Watch Wall Street Week right here on Bloomberg.
More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Now, Dubai has long sold itself as a safe haven in the Middle East, but Iran's unprecedented strikes on U.S. partners across the region are putting that reputation under pressure. Well, Bloomberg Originals has been looking at how Dubai's model of stability is being challenged.
These attacks were unprecedented. We could not have imagined this scenario actually playing out.
Most airports and airlines in the region are affected.
Drone has hit a residential tower overnight in Dubai. It sparked a fire and residents were forced to evacuate the building.
This conflict has come to the doorstep of a territory that many perceived to be one of the world's top safe haven territories.
That perception was by design and helped attract both money and talent. The strikes threaten more than lives and infrastructure. They're testing Dubai's model of stability and the image it wants to project.
Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough.
Thousands of deaths across the region have been reported in the war begun by the US and Israel. Iran's wave of retaliatory strikes targeted US allies, prompting the UAE to prioritize safety above all else.
Iranian strikes have hit airports, military bases, even data centers.
The UAE has seemingly defied what many assumed would be an existential threat. It's navigated peril before, but with war on its doorstep, can it do it again?
Well, subscribers can watch that documentary in full on the Bloomberg terminal and on Bloomberg.com. Now, Bloomberg understands the Pentagon has asked Congress for an extra $200 billion to fund the war in Iran. Now, sources say the request has been sent to the White House for review, and President Trump is yet to sign it off. When asked about the $200 billion figure, the U.S. Defense Secretary did not deny it, but said the number could move.
As far as $200 billion, I think that number could move, obviously. It takes money to kill bad guys. So we're going back to Congress and our folks there to ensure that we're properly funded for what's been done, for what we may have to do in the future.
Let's bring in Laurel Rapp, U.S. and North America Program Director at Chatham House. Laura, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, first of all, you know, we're in like the third week now of the conflict in the Middle East. Does the U.S. want out? Does it look like they're looking for an off-ramp?
It's really not clear at this stage. The U.S. says it is continuing airstrikes. It is continuing to hit military targets. It wants to take out that ballistic missile system. There may be emerging splits with the Israelis here, right? We saw Israel hit one of Iran's largest natural gas fields, South Pars, over the last couple of days, with huge Iranian responses in Qatar's LNG ports. And so the economic costs here are rising. We know these are things the Trump administration cares deeply about because they hit Americans' wallets. This is a big voter issue. But we have not seen a clear path to de-escalation at this stage or a plan forward.
So what does Iran want? Do they just want to inflict maximum pain in terms of energy prices for President Trump?
That's right. They know they have a couple of trump cards to play here. They know they can have huge economic dislocating effects here in the global energy market, but they also know it isn't just confined to energy. They can target and threaten the Strait of Hormuz, and so very little traffic is passing through Hormuz at this point, disrupting global commerce, raising prices across the board for every country that trades. That's everyone.
But to what end, Laurel? So is it trying to get Europe to engage more, to engage in the conflict? Is it to try and get China involved because everybody has to lose with the higher price of oil, or is it just to get the U.S. to back off?
If we know anything about this Iranian regime, we know that it is focused on survival, right? This is an existential battle for the Iranian regime and the senior leadership and the Revolutionary Guards Force. And so they are going to try to inflict maximum damage for as long as they can, for as long as the U.S. and Israel is hitting them militarily.
I mean, would Israel back down? I mean, can the U.S. convince Israel to back down?
This is a question. We've seen Israel conduct unilateral strikes against Iranian targets over the past years. We've seen joint strikes between the U.S. and Israel. And so the U.S. could say, we're done, we're going home now, and Israel may want to continue. Look, the Iranians also have a huge vote in this too, and they can choose to retaliate in any number of ways. And we know this has been a huge risk as the U.S. has looked at past contingencies on Iran to say, what are the tools Iran has in its toolbox? It has proxy forces across the region that can hit U.S. troops and allied partners, and it has this huge commercial leverage of controlling Hormuz.
Was this a gross U.S. miscalculation?
The U.S. didn't really seem to have a plan here. They went in with a whole range of shifting and conflicting goals and objectives here. I used to be a policy planner at the State Department, a U.S. diplomat, and you start a plan with a set of goals. You say, what is your goal? And then you build a plan to achieve that goal. And you apply U.S. tools in service of those goals and those ends. And as far as we've been able to see publicly in the early days, there was a really shifting set of goals here. And so that makes a plan really difficult to execute. It also makes it a bit easier to decide when to stop. Because if you can shift your goals, if you can be more flexible, President Trump can say, all right, today we're done. Maybe the costs have become too high for the American people. And so we're gonna pack up and we're going to go home. But that's sort of the fundamental issue here is Iran has been a threat to the U.S. for many years and to
He deployed later to Afghanistan, where he was killed on 19 October 2011. Killed 10 years after 9/11, 15 years ago. He was one of the 1%, the best of America. Not just a guardsman, but a law enforcement officer back home and a family man. Their names are now etched into our mission and into the soul of a grateful nation. I stand here today speaking to you, the American people, not through filters, not through reporters, not through cable news spin. A dishonest and anti-Trump press will stop at nothing. We know this at this point. To downplay progress, amplify every cost, and call into question every step. Sadly, TDS is in their DNA. They want President Trump to fail. But you, the American people, know better. Yes, there are reporters in front of me, but they are not our audience today. It's you, the good, decent, patriotic American people. You, the hardworking, tax-paying, God-fearing their names are now Biden squander American credibility. This is not those wars. President Trump knows better. Epic fury is different. It's laser focused. It's decisive. Our objectives, given directly from our America First president, remain exactly what they were on day one. These are not the media's objectives, not Iran's objectives, not new objectives, our objectives, unchanged, on target, and on plan. Destroy missiles, launchers, and Iran's defense industrial base so they cannot rebuild, destroy their navy, and Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Our objectives from day one. To the patriotic members of the press, nobody can deliver perfection in wartime. This building knows that more than anyone. But report the reality. We're winning decisively and on our terms. Iran is a vast country, and just like Hamas and their tunnels, they've poured any aid, any economic development, humanitarian aid into tunnels and rockets. That's what they did with Hamas. Iran has funneled decades of state resources, not to their people, but into missiles and drones and proxies and buried facilities. But we are hunting them down, methodically, ruthlessly.
여유를 상징하는 슈퍼크루즈입니다. 자동차 손목용 한다 갑자기 자기가 혼자. 와, 신기하다. 위에 보시면 녹색으로 라이트가 딱 들어와요. 그러면 이제 진짜 핸즈프리로 운전을 하는 거예요. 진짜 편해요. 굉장히 여유 있습니다. 안국역 4번 출구 주차장 안내해줘.
지금 있는 주차장을 찾았어요.
아리야, 타이어 공기압이 얼마인지 확인해줘. 아리야, 차량 통풍 시트 켜줘. 아리야, 코스피 지수가 어떻게 돼?
37.03%입니다.
안돼! 2026 더 뉴 에스컬레이드를 타면서 굉장히 이제 럭셔리하고 여유로운 느낌을 많이 느꼈단 말이죠. 이렇게 여유롭고 럭셔리한 일상을 즐기시는 진정한 상남자들 라이프 스타일에 정말 추천드리고 싶습니다.
Ability to manufacture new ballistic missiles has probably taken the hardest hit of all. Ballistic missile attacks against our forces down 90% since the start of the conflict. Same with one-way attack UAVs. Think kamikaze drones, down 90%. Now, the Iranians will still shoot, we know that, but they would shoot a lot more if they could, but they can't. The last job anyone in the world wants right now? Senior leader for the IRGC or Besiege. Temp jobs, all of them. And to borrow a page from Admiral Ernest King in World War II, we've decided to share the ocean with Iran. We've given them the bottom half. We've damaged or sunk over 120 of their Navy ships, with battle damage assessments pending for many more. See, oftentimes we have to wait a few days on battle damage assessment to get the real number. Their surface fleet is no longer a factor. Their submarines, they once had 11, are gone. Their military ports are crippled. Iran has terrorized the United States and our interests for 47 years. Their core industries, not steel or agriculture or tourism, their core industries are state-sponsored terrorism, proxy militias, underground networks, ballistic missiles, and a violent, messianic, Islamist ideology chasing some sort of apocalyptic endgame. A regime like that, refusing to abandon its nuclear ambitions, is not just a regional problem. It's a direct threat to America, to freedom, and to civilization. The world, the Middle East, our ungrateful allies in Europe, even segments of our own press should be saying one thing to President Trump. Thank you. Thank you for the courage to stop this terror state from holding the world hostage with missiles while building or attempting to build a nuclear bomb. Thank you for doing the work of the free world. Yesterday's ceremony reminded us why we fight. Not for nation building or democracy promotion, but to crush direct threats to America, Americans, and our interests. We fight to win, and we are winning on our terms, following our objectives. My 13-year-old son popped into my office last night while I was editing these remarks. He asked about the war and the families I met at Dover. And I looked at him and I said, they died for you, son, so that your generation doesn't have to deal with a nuclear Iran. It's the truth, and they did. So to the families who said, finish this, we will. And I say the same to every American who wants peace through strength. May Almighty God continue to bless our troops in this fight. And again, to the American people, please pray for them. Every day, on bended knee, with your family, in your schools, in your churches, in the name of Jesus Christ. To the troops, keep going, and Godspeed. Over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you all for being here. I also had the honor yesterday, as the Secretary said, of traveling up to Dover with the President to welcome home our 6 fallen. It was an honor and a privilege for me to be there and to say thank you to their families. And I want to mention their names this morning. From the 6th Aerial Refueling Wing out of MacDill Air Force Base, Florida, but stationed as part of an active associate unit at Birmingham, Alabama, Major Alex Klenner, John Alex Klenner, Major Ariana Savino, she was posthumously promoted from captain to major, and Technical Sergeant Ashley Pruitt, the boom operator on that crew. From the 121st Aerial Refueling Ring, Ohio Air National Guard out of Rickenbacker Air National Guard Base in Columbus, Ohio, Captain Seth Koval, Captain Curtis Anks, and now Master Sergeant Tyler Simmons, who was also promoted in the boom operator on that crew. To a person and every family member I spoke with yesterday, they all shared that their family members loved serving. They loved being part of a great team and a crew, and they loved airplanes and aviation. Our nation's tanker crews really are unsung heroes, incredible warriors who put their lives on the line so we can continue to take the fight to an enemy. I've personally witnessed their courage and tenacity many times, from the morning of September 11th, where they answered my call for some help, to the skies over foreign countries where they've come forward out of their safe tanker track to give me gas when I simply could not leave a ground force that was engaged in a firefight. They've answered the call and come forward time and time and time again. I'm filled with incredible pride and gratitude for all that the tanker crews do, our pilots, our boom operators, and the maintainers. And to the families of our 6 fallen, know that we share your grief. Our nation will never forget their sacrifice, and we will never forget their names. Our entire joint force mourns with you today, and will continue to remember their incredible gift of a great example for all of us. Now let me turn to an operations update. U.S. CENTCOM remains on plan to achieve our military objectives and remain unrelenting in our pursuit of Iranian missile capabilities, UAV capabilities, and their Navy, and as the Secretary said, their industrial base. Each day we continue to attack deeper into Iranian territory. As reported by U.S. Central Command yesterday, the U.S. military dropped 5,000-pound penetrator weapons into underground storage facilities, storing coastal defense cruise missiles and other support equipment. These weapons are bespokely designed to get through concrete and/or rocks and function after penetrating those barriers. We continue to hunt and kill mine storage facilities and naval ammunition depots. We continue to hunt and kill afloat assets, including more than 120 vessels and 44 mine layers, and the pressure will continue. We're flying further to the east now and penetrating deeper into Iranian airspace to hunt and kill one-way attack garrisons, destroying Iran's ability to project power outside of its borders. The A-10 Warthog is now in the fight across the southern flank and is hunting and killing fast attack watercraft in the Straits of Hormuz. In addition, AH-64 Apaches have joined the fight on the southern flank, and they continue to work on the southern side, and that includes some of our allies who are using Apaches to handle one-way attack drones. In Iraq, AH-64s have been striking against Iranian-aligned militia groups to make sure that we suppress any threat in Iraq against U.S. forces or U.S. interests. And we remain focused on pursuit of any platform that Iran could field to harm Americans or our partners. Last Friday, Admiral Cooper and the CENTCOM team conducted precision strikes against more than 90 targets on Karg Island, which included all of their military-only infrastructure, which included air defenses, naval base, mine storage, and deployment facilities. And as the Secretary mentioned, we continue to strike against Iran's defense industrial base and will continue to do so. Today, I want to continue my theme of talking about members of our incredible joint force. Today, I want to talk about some exceptional airmen who are engaged in the fight daily. United States Air Force, Air Force Reserve, and Air National Guard crews within our bomber force, the B-1s, B-2s, and B-52s, and the airmen on the ground who maintain and load these weapon systems. They are the backbone of America's long-range strike capability, and their contributions to Epic Fury have been decisive. Assigned to STRATCOM under Admiral Rich Correll and supported by TRANSCOM, the tanker force that we've talked about, under the command of General Randall Reed, every mission is designed to achieve overwhelming outcomes on behalf of the United States and our allies. Last weekend, I had the chance to go out and see some of our deployed bomber forces, the B-1 and B-52 crews, and I had a chance to sit down with some young aviators and maintainers and ask them, how do you feel? Tell me about your typical day. And these are crews comprised of between 2 and 5 airmen, 2 on the B-2s, 5 on the B-52s, and 4 in the B-1s out there. Some of these Americans are in their early or mid-20s, and we give them the gift of this incredible responsibility hundreds of thousands of pounds of aircraft, and they take off and go do our work as required. Their mission actually begins the day prior when they're given a target or a bunch of targets, and they begin to study those targets, look at what are the effects required, what are the weapons required to get there, how will we program these weapons, what is the weather, what is the tanker flow. It's an incredibly complex problem that we give each and every one of these crews, and they work it over the period of 24 hours prior, get some rest, and then step out the door to go fly. The last thing they do is they check all of their equipment, their oxygen masks, survival gear, load pistols, and get ready to go. They crank the jets about an hour prior to takeoff and then launch into the daylight, doing their pre-flight checks, and as the kids say, lock in and prepare to go to war, sometimes on a long and stressful journey. During the flight, they're surrounded by technology and capabilities, and they'll do multiple aerial refueling efforts across tankers on the way to the AOR, area of responsibility, either coming from the States or coming from a forward deployed basing. And I will tell you, as a fighter pilot, getting gas is a lot easier in an F-16 than it is in a B-1.
자신의 차를 한 번도 자랑한 적 없던 그가 처음으로 차에 대해 자랑을 한 것은 차를 팔고 나서였다.
얼마 받았게? 딜러끼리 경쟁하는 비교 견적으로 최고가 확인. 차주여, 자랑스러운 주인이 되라. 엔카.
Joint force together to go do the things that we've tasked them to do to put force. I am personally, and we are personally grateful for the tenacity and professionalism of the brave men and women who serve inside Stratcom, CENTCOM, Spacecom, Cybercom, Transcom, and the rest of the Joint Force. And I'll close where I started. I ask today that we remember those 6 fallen that came home. They represent the best of our nation. For those families that are feeling the pain, know that we are with you and will remain with you. May we always prove worthy of their sacrifice. And I'll turn it back over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Take a couple questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given the updated degradation in strike target numbers you laid out, how close would you say we are towards achieving the President's objectives, and what is the end game of the operation without divulging any sensitive battle plans?
Well, we wouldn't want to set a definitive time frame on that, but as we've said, we're on plan. So we're looking at those metrics very closely, relaying that to the President and the National Security Team, but feel confident that as, again, we're more stand-in, means we're over the top, even further in, and we have even more of an exact sense of what we're striking and why, and even more dynamically, meaning because the intelligence improves, we're able to more quickly identify targets when they, let's say they come out of an underground facility where they've been hiding and able to strike it before it strikes or right after it shoots. But we're very much on plan, and that's why I want to speak to the American people here. You hear a lot of noise about widening or new missions or speculation about what we should or should not be doing. This is a clear set of objectives. The president has given us every capability we need to accomplish that. We've got the best in the world in uniform executing it on the ground. They believe in and are invested in this mission, and it will be at the president's choosing, ultimately, where we say, hey, we've achieved what we need to on behalf of the American people to ensure our security. So no time set on that, but we're very much on track. Absolutely. Yes, right here.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary. David Zier, Real America's Voice News. What countries have been the most cooperative with us, including the Gulf states, as Europe hedges? And I also wanted to ask you, the internet blackouts by the regime, it's been shut down for weeks. Is the U.S. military playing a role in fighting against the regime, blocking VPN networks and satellites and other things? Is there a role for the U.S. military there?
Obviously, on the allies and partners side, Israel from day one has been an incredible and capable partner, willing and able. There's nothing like capabilities and partners that are able to use them. The Gulf states have stepped up incredibly. In fact, Iran's sort of reckless attempt to strike civilian infrastructure and other things has brought countries who maybe would have not been as all in as they are today squarely into our orbit. And we're proud to be defending with them, standing with them, you name it. UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and others who have been right there. And we're grateful for that kind of support. As far as the internet, we're watching the regime try to tighten its grip as much as possible. And we're obviously taking countermeasures, many of which we can't talk about here, to ensure that messaging is delivered, not just to the Iranian people writ large, but to the right audiences, certain audiences that need to hear certain things about what their fate might look like or what their choices are. So even though that regime is trying really hard to ensure the world can't see, right? They want to put out fake AI-generated images, which, by the way, sometimes our press happens to fall for, like the Abraham Lincoln on fire and turning around. These AI-generated images are meant to make it look like something's happening when the exact opposite is. So they make up fake reports and fake images to lie to their own people to try to make it. But even then, their own people can barely receive a lot of those messages and communicate because of the blackout that they've imposed upon them. But we work around that for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General, overnight, Iran launched missiles across the Gulf. They managed to hit the Saudi oil refinery on the Red Sea. What does it mean that they have that capability now, 3 weeks into the war? And Mr. Secretary, you mentioned civilian infrastructure. Iran seems to be treating U.S. diplomatic outposts, embassies, consulates like they are legitimate hard targets in the region now. What is the Pentagon doing to, I guess, secure those assets, stop those attacks?
Absolutely.
Thanks for the question on the missile strikes. You know, as we said and have always said clearly, they came into this fight with a lot of weapons. This is why we continue to be as aggressive and assertive as we can against their ballistic missile capability, both their medium-range ballistic missile capability and their short-range missile capabilities. So we are continuing to hunt and find them and kill them, and we will continue to do so. So they still retain some capability. And we have layered defenses throughout the region that will allow us to protect those. And we're working with our partners across the Gulf region to help them improve any defensive capabilities that they may need.
To that point on capabilities, you know, Iran is an energy-rich country, could be, should be. Instead, like so many other places driven by a radical ideology, they've spent that money instead of investing in their people. And that's why you had millions of Iranians protesting. It's because they felt like their quality of life didn't match what it could be or should be. And what was the Iranian state? There's a reason we call Iran the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, because they took and they invested in missiles, and they invested in launchers and UAVs, and we are destroying and degrading that in historic proportions. We're fighting every single day to continue to compel. And you mentioned embassies and consulates. Unlike previous administrations, we are doubling and tripling down on ensuring that our people, regardless of their Department of War, Department of State, whatever they do, are secure in those facilities. And the best defense is a good offense. And so we're not afraid to go after and kill anybody, and we have a lot of them attempting to target our diplomatic facilities. Iran, you know, we're not surprised that they would indiscriminately target, and we're still seeing that. Jerry.
As part of the justification for the war against Iran, the White House role in helping the Taliban during the war in Afghanistan. And Chairman